peoples of the worldwide federated internet. What's good? It's gonna be a little different. I just want to share some thoughts, some things on my mind a little heavy. Funny thing is, what I'm figuring out is complex times like this, in a lot of ways, will make you lose respect for some people. And I'm realizing that a lot of people, including myself, I'll put myself in there, lack the ability to converse, maybe see something from another person's perspective, though that other person may be wrong, and at least be able to understand why a person feels the way they feel. So I watched the Dave Chappelle special, 846, I believe is what it's called. He titled it for the amount of minutes and seconds that Mr. Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck. Interesting comedy special, because it really wasn't much of a comedy special. Probably won't quote a verse or anything like that this go round, but it's just some things rattling around in my brain. For Dave Chappelle, a comedian, this is not me celebrating everything the man says. This is not me celebrating everything the man does. But you have to be able to see wisdom when a person speaks, whether you like that person or not. I don't dislike Dave Chappelle. That's not why I said that. But I know some will watch his special and lack the ability to see beyond their bias, listen to what he's saying, and go, man, maybe this guy has some valid points. I think in a discussion going on in this country right now, or the lack of discussion, let's say that, there are things that are lost in the sauce, so to speak. You have two sides of an argument, two sides of a country, two ideologies that are opposed in a country. Nobody's conversing and nobody's listening. I do my best to be as fair as I can in assessing people's arguments. Now, some arguments at face value, let's keep it real, they're just foolish. There are some arguments that are just foolish, and nothing will change that. They just lack logic. But that doesn't mean that all arguments are foolish. And that doesn't mean that everything that's said by a person is 100% wrong. There's people who feel attacked, but on both sides. This kind of reminds me of what Donald Trump said about the Charlottesville rally or incident. There was fine people on both sides. I'm not going to get into an assessment of what he said. Suffice it to say, people have mischaracterized what he said. If you watch the full video, he does not defend neo-Nazis and white nationalists. This is not a defense of President Trump. I'm just telling you the facts are the facts. I had a conversation with some good people today, fellow believers after church, and I said I like to pride myself in being a person that no matter what my bias is, one way or another, I like to side with wherever the facts lie. So if I think a certain way and the facts run contrary to what I think, well, it is what it is. I'm wrong. Facts are the facts. Nobody's having a conversation and recognizing the nuance in some of these arguments. Do we have a policing issue in the United States? We absolutely do. Is some of that policing issue on the lines of race? Yeah, some of it is. Now, just because you lean more conservative, it doesn't mean you have to deny that. And this is where I don't like the campy mentalities and ideologies in this day. Like I said, I like to try to be fair. Now, on the flip side of that, there's an issue with police, for sure. Is some of it racial? Yeah. Does that give excuse for the other side? And what I mean by that is, does that give excuse for the crime rate amongst ourselves within predominantly black communities? So yes, some of our ancestors were slaves. Yes, some of our ancestors went through some really egregious time. Does it have a psychological toll on generations after that? Yeah. But at what point can you stop using that as an excuse for what you do in your own neighborhood? Now, this is not excusing the police, and this is where I say there's a nuance to these arguments, and both sides are not listening. Yes, there is a policing issue. Does that give you the right to be ignorant within your own neighborhoods? Yes, there is a policing issue. Does that excuse the rate at which black people kill other black people? So when you say Black Lives Matter, that's a fact. They do matter. And there is some disparities in policing. That's a fact. The nuance to that argument is the issue is really over policing and not so much race. There's nuance. Like I said, there's nuance. And the flip side of that is when you say Black Lives Matter, and then one of your friends that may be on the other side of the aisle says, well, what about the crime within your own community, black on black crime? There's nuance. Don't write them off. What they're saying is not wrong. But if there can be a conversation, there can be resolution. Now, I said all that to say, you know where I stand. There will be no real resolution outside of salvation, outside of the Lord Jesus Christ. The Lord Jesus Christ changes hearts. But in the world we live in, I understand the situation. I understand that there's a high probability some might watch my videos, might hear the Bible truths, and might seek the Lord and might get saved. I would hope that would be the case. I would hope that throughout some of my videos, I've presented a clear enough picture of the gospel that people could listen through those videos, understand what they need, and take action. Receive the free gift, the death, burial, and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. But that said, I know that's not going to be a large number of people. Not that it can't be. It's very possible. God can do anything, and I understand that. Before somebody jumps in the comments and says that, I understand that. But let's say that that doesn't happen. Okay, so in the meantime, what do? Well, let me inject some rationale into this conversation. And really, watching that Dave Chappelle special actually spawned this. Again, I respect what he does because I believe not everything he says is right, but he's a rational voice. Let me try to be a rational voice with a Christian worldview. I understand that men are wicked. That's not a white thing. That's not a black thing. That's not an Asian thing. It's not a Middle Eastern thing. It's a mankind thing. This is a problem that all of us have. So how do we deal with this issue that we're having right now within the country, within the United States? Police brutality, racism. Is racism as big a deal as it's made out to be? And this is where I'd like to inject reason so we can all sit down and have a legit conversation instead of screaming at each other. I was once there, my youth and my exuberance, whenever I held a different perspective than somebody else, I was more prone to attack. I was more prone to go on the defensive. As I've gotten older, I've realized that that doesn't produce the results that we're looking for. We are all in some way, some of us, let's say, I would hope most of us are looking for legit resolutions. There is some agitators that are not looking for a resolution. And I'll deal with that as well. Let's be 100% honest with ourselves and clear. It's not a coincidence the stories that are pushed across social media. We know other countries run psyop campaigns, fake stories. They foment and throw fuel on the fire. We know that. This is why when I see stories, especially on social media, I don't just jump to anger. I sit back and I say to myself, let me get some more details on this before I assume. Holding a grudge gets you nowhere, especially a grudge that doesn't belong to you. I never did a trace to see if I have ancestors that are slaves, but it's more than likely I do. My granddad was born and raised in Georgia. I'm pretty sure my great grandfather was probably a slave when he was born, and I believe they grew up on a plantation. But is his gripe my grudge? And does that make sense? Did I miss out on something because of what my ancestors endured? Me personally, I haven't. I've been afforded great opportunity in the United States of America. I've achieved great success. I understand that's not everybody's story. But let's analyze, why is that not everybody's story? This might be long. I'll try not to make it long, but it just might be, just because, like I said, I got a bunch of thoughts. Personal choices play a role. My mom was very hard on me growing up. And I made some choices, very personal choices, of what I wasn't going to do. She beat it into me. I'm very thankful for what my mom did. She beat it into me. I've always been a law-abiding citizen. I didn't say I never did anything wrong, but I've always had respect for the law, and I've always had respect for law enforcement. That's often conflated with saying all officers are good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I respect the law. I understand there are bad officers. I understand there are some officers who are, in fact, racist. I can't change those men's hearts. Only God can work those situations out. But my personal choices have led me down very good paths. God has blessed my life greatly, and I've seen a lot, and I'm very thankful. I grew up with and around people that went other routes, did other things, made different choices. Some of the people I grew up around were in gangs, gang violence. Some are in jail, some are dead. Is that because of racism? Again, there's nuance to this argument. Does that mean that all their misfortune was because of racism? We grew up in the same environments. So what happened? What was different? Personal choices. Now, for people on the other side that are racism deniers, you must understand that racism is a real thing and it is not dead. And there are people who are racist. So when you say that, when you make it seem like racism doesn't exist, yeah, some people on the other side of that argument may tend to get agitated and therefore tune you out completely as a result of that. And I think there's a better way to have this discussion. And again, to the minorities, whether you're Hispanic, black, or whatever, that might look at arguments from the other side and say, well, these people don't understand. Everything is against me and everybody's against me. Let's back up and let's look at the real situation and unpack that and see why you get such a pushback on holding such an extreme view of racism in the country. Again, are there racist people? Yes, they exist. That's a fact. We all know this. Can that racist person, in fact, stop you from achieving your goals? When you look at people like Barack Obama, I'm going to mention some names, and for the black people who are on one side of the aisle, you may not respect some of these people, but respect their accomplishments. When you look at people like Ben Carson, Condoleezza Rice, Jay-Z, think about that. Man was a drug dealer. Took the money that he made selling drugs with his partner Dame Dash, started a record label, and is now a billionaire. Let that sink in. Snoop Dogg, one of the most iconic figures in the hip hop realm, known worldwide. There's almost nowhere you can go where he would not be recognized. I can guarantee you Snoop Dogg could land in the middle of Afghanistan, walk the streets of, let's say Kabul, and people would know exactly who he was. That's crazy. That's something. That man attained a status. These are people that have achieved great things in this country. Does that mean everything is right? Does that mean that the system is set up how it should be? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but understand, when you scream oppression, people on the other side of the argument are looking at people like Snoop Dogg, Jay-Z, Barack Obama, Condoleezza Rice, Ben Carson, and they're going, now wait a minute. Like, if it was as bad as they say it is, could we have had a black president for 2 terms? Like, you realize. So again, this is where we can have a discussion and actually get to some kind of resolution. You realize that there is people, droves of people, millions of people who voted for Barack Obama twice and also voted for President Trump. So for the people on one side, that should give you pause, like, wait a minute, maybe things aren't as they seem. And now the people on the other side, you have to see situations like what happened to George Floyd and many other situations. And though I understand that these are not isolated cases, and these are not cases that only involve black people, because these things, I know the stories, these things happen to white people as well. But for my people on the other side, I ask you to give a little grace, and this is why I ask you to give a little grace. We understand what the media is doing, and we understand what the media is pushing. We understand that the media pushes race to the forefront every time they get the opportunity and every time they get the chance. And you know that people are enamored with the media. They believe what they see. Now, you might not believe it. Maybe you have a little more wisdom. Maybe you've seen some things that these people haven't seen. I'm just asking you, give a little grace. These people don't know what you know. They don't have the information that you have. It's not because they don't have access to it. Maybe it never occurred to them to look it up. Now, all that goes back to personal responsibility. And I know this. I'm not negating a person's personal responsibility, but in an effort to actually have a conversation, I'm asking you, give a little grace and understand that the media is constantly pushing a narrative. They're constantly pushing racism to the forefront. It's all we hear about. It's all we see. It can enrage anyone. So if that's all that these people on the other side are seeing, and all that's being peddled to them is, hey, look at what they're doing to you, then the emotion they feel, even though it may be misplaced, the media is really inducing PTSD. So what do you do to a person with PTSD? Do you scream at them? Nah, you try to reason with them. You try to get them some help. You try to get them to see that, hey man, let's talk about this. Are things as bad as you think they are? Maybe they're not. Let me understand where you're coming from. Explain your position, and maybe I can help you. Maybe we can talk this out. But on the other side of the aisle, I believe, because you look at people that have these problems, and your first thought is to attack, so there can't be a conversation. I understand that the Black Lives Matter organization is a corrupt organization. You might understand that the Black Lives Matter organization is a corrupt organization. But to the layman who won't take the time and due diligence to look into it, they see the organization as a benevolent organization sent to help them. And they don't know that that's not the case. So should we be screaming at these people? Or should we be sitting down like, all right, tell me what you think about this organization. All right, cool. Well, let me tell you what I saw on their website, or let me tell you who some of their donors are. Let me tell you what they actually believe. I don't think it actually lines up what you believe. Maybe you didn't see that. If you can have a conversation and you can have respect for a person, maybe they come to the conclusion that, man, you know what? You're right. I never thought about that. And vice versa. For my blacktivists, if you can sit down and have a conversation, a rational conversation, like I believe Dave Chappelle did with some people on the other side, maybe they can recognize, hold up, yeah, there is a problem. And we need some reforms. You guys have a legitimate gripe. I think this is what we need. We need a conversation. I like talking to people. I like reasoning with people. I love it when I can talk to somebody and reason with a person. And I actually appreciate when I can get to the point where I'm like, you know what? You're actually right. I'm wrong on this issue. You know what that comes from? What that's born out of? A conversation. An argument can't produce that result. But we have to get to the point. Whoever breaks first is irrelevant. But one of us has to break, and we have to be willing to have a conversation. If that doesn't happen, God help us. Stay frosty, people.